Ladies and gents, this is WW1 Battle of the Somme 1916. I'm reacting to WW1 series by the Epic History TV, and I thought before I react to the next part, I should react to this particular battle because this is an iconic battle. This is the battle at the French border, French and Britain versus Germany at the trench warfare. I think most of the whenever somebody talk about trench warfare, most of the things that comes to your mind, most of the horror that you know about trench warfare comes from this particular battle. I could be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure it is. Even the Somme Blackadder, that's ending that it has, comes from this particular battle, if I'm not mistaken. So it's just horrible, the trench warfare. And in this battle particular, I'm pretty sure we're going to witness so many people dying. I mean, this battle is not just horrible because of what it is, and in itself it is horrible, the trench warfare, but it's horrible because it's during the World War I, the Great War apparently, because at that time the security of the nations were such at high stakes that basically our military is basically conscripting civilians. So they are going to the, first of all they were recruiting, then they conscripting. So what happened was, first of all, they told their civilians the war is going on and this is really critical. So basically plumbers, clerks, shop workers, basically all of them who never ever fought in any war, just enlisted to fight in this war. They don't have any experience, but they still try to go to the battle. Obviously it's not that simple. They do get some training, but most of the situation they don't get training because the soldier supply is so short. So lots of them were just basically from the home to the border was just basically transported there and given the gun. They just verbally been told like you should do this and do that, and that's nothing, especially at this larger scale, especially in this particular trench warfare in World War I, where chemical attacks were introduced. Do you see, this is one of the highest level of battle there ever was, because of the surprising attacks of chemical warfare that nobody even dreamt of, and all the trench warfare and the massive scale of it. It's a World War I, and lots of civilians who has no training at all were got shoved there, like go there fight. And what the worst thing about it is, in trench warfare you don't have much of tactics. You can't have tactics. It's a trench warfare. People have dig holes in the ground and strategically went inside them. There are barbed wires. There are no minus points. There are no weak points there. So what do? You basically just do mortar attacks, and as soon as mortar attack stops, your country basically tells you to go. Your commander basically tells you to go run inside the no man's land and try to take it without any strategy. So 500, 1,000 people just runs to the no man's land, and they get mowed down by the machine gun, by the Germans, MG42s. I mean, that is just, and these are not some soldiers who know what to do, when to do it, how to survive under pressure. These are just some civilians. This is such a horrid thing. And all the trench warfare imagery that basically people have, I think it came from this particular battle. Because in World War I, that entire trench at the French border, that's such a massive trench, it's just ridiculous. And this was one of the massive battles of it. Yeah, so let's watch the video.
(1916). Europe is in the grips of the most destructive conflict yet known, World War I. Much of the fiercest fighting takes place on the Western Front, where British, French and German armies are locked in a bloody stalemate along 450 miles of trenches.
That is mind-numbing. 450 miles long trench. It's just continuous trench, 450 miles. First of all, this is what baffles me. Do they have soldiers every few meters in that 450 miles radius? Because otherwise, won't they have these weak points where people can just sneak in? So they must have people every few meters in their entire 450 mile trench. How many people were there, man? When you see the scale 450 miles, when you understand that, it's mind-numbing. How can that be possible? And how did they dug that many holes faster and put barbed wires there, created this makeshift tunnel type of things where lots of people house themselves? Because trenches are not some just simple digging and just simple long hole in the ground. There are certain they make rooms type of things inside of them where people certain people can be housed there. When they need, they can get out. This is stupid. When people are at war, they are at one of the most creative side of them comes out, because this level of things you can't even understand it. Like, how did they do that?
There have been millions of casualties, but neither side can break the deadlock. The combination of barbed wire, machine guns, and heavy artillery means troops trying to cross no man's land. The open
These are real
ground
photos.
between the trenches are slaughtered en masse. The advantage is always with the defender. But the Allies are committed to more attacks. They're determined to liberate the parts of France and Belgium that were occupied by Germany in the first months of the war. The British and French have agreed to launch a joint offensive in the summer of 1916. But the Germans strike first. In February, they launch a massive assault on the French fortress city of Verdun. Its defense requires all available French reserves. So the summer offensive will be led by the British, their biggest attack of the war so far. Its chief aim now, to relieve pressure on the French at Verdun.
Think about this. British are helping French. First of all, this is the First World War. This is not so. World War II hasn't happened yet. This is the First World War. Napoleonic Wars was a few 100 or so years ago. So this is First World War. All right, and in that, British are helping French at the level that British casualties are gonna just skyrocket. They are just going to send British people and French people too, but British people too there at the no man's land. They're going to get mowed down. Why? So British people can help the people at Verdun, because Germany are bombing the hell out of that place, the Verdun, and people are getting dying left and right. So British are gonna send their own people basically to die in no man's land. So the pressure at Verdun gets lower, so French people can be at ease. This feels so surreal, knowing the French and British relations of the past.
The attack will take place along a 25-mile front near the River Somme in July. The new British commander, General Sir Douglas Haig, would prefer to attack near Ypres, where there are clearer strategic objectives. But the Somme is where the British and French armies meet, so where a joint offensive must take place. He would also prefer to wait until his inexperienced divisions have received more training. But the French need his help now.
See, there you go.
The Somme.
So basically untrained civilians just get shipped there, get thrown into no man's land, most of them just dies.
Has so far been a quiet sector, allowing the Germans to build up strong defensive positions. Here the Germans have two formidable defensive lines, with a third under construction. Each consists of 3 lines of trenches: fire, support, and reserve, connected by communication trenches. They bristle with machine gun positions and are anchored on fortified villages and strongpoints. In front of the trenches there are thick belts of barbed wire. Below are dugouts, some 10 meters deep, to shelter German troops from artillery fire.
There you go, see?
Telephone lines buried 6 feet deep allow troops at the front to communicate with artillery batteries during an attack. The German troops that hold the line are well trained, and most are combat veterans. The The offensive will be
So this whole thing is screwed basically. Germans are more experienced, they have better defensives, and British are all amateurs, just civilians. So basically all the British people are gonna get shoved inside the no man's land, and Germans are just going to mow them down. This is horrible, man.
led by the British Fourth Army, commanded by Lieutenant General Sir Henry Rawlinson. With Haig, he draws up the plan of attack. To overcome the Germans' formidable defences, the British will carry out a massive, week-long artillery bombardment with 1,400 guns. This is expected to destroy German barbed wire, flatten trenches, and kill their occupants. 19 mines are also dug under key German strongpoints and filled with explosive, ready to detonate just before the attack begins. To the north, the British Third Army will make a diversionary attack at Gommecourt. The 16 British and French infantry divisions are then expected to take their objectives with minimal opposition. The attack will begin at 7:30 a.m. in broad daylight, so the artillery can observe its fire. British morale is high, and the men are confident of victory. Many of the units taking part are PALS battalions, the eager recruits of 1914, now about to face combat for the first time. But on the eve of the assault, there are worrying reports that the British bombardment has been only partially successful.
So there you go, understand what. So their plan was, we are just going to bombard them, all the barbed wire is going to get flattened, most of trenches are going to get ruined, and we are just going to run towards it in masses, and we're going to face very little resistance. But clearly that's not going to happen.
1.6 million shells are fired. But due to inexperienced gun crews, a shortage of heavy guns, and faulty shells, much of the German barbed wire remains intact. German defenders, too, are largely unscathed in their deep dugouts. And from captured prisoners and listening in on uncoded telephone calls, the Germans know exactly when and where the British are coming.
Damn. Epic history should have put on, more of a horror music here than this epic music.
The Allied artillery bombardment reaches its peak at 7 a.m. At 7:20, the British detonate an enormous mine under a German strongpoint, the Hawthorne Redoubt, and British troops rush forward to occupy the crater. At 7:28, further mines are detonated under German strongpoints along the front. At 7:30, the Allied bombardment moves on to the German second line, as British and French infantry begin their advance across no man's land. German troops, meanwhile, race up from their dugouts to set up machine guns. It's an enduring myth that all the British infantry climb out of their trenches and walk steadily towards the German line. A few units do, but most send men out into no man's land before the bombardment lifts, so the final dash toward the enemy line is as short as possible. But in the northern sector, whichever tactics are used, the British are easy targets for German machine gunners, especially where they bunch up to get through the few gaps in the barbed wire.
Oh god, this is real video.
The British infantry advance bravely, but are mown down in their hundreds.
There you go. This particular area and this particular instance that he's talking about, that's the most famous trench warfare image of them all. That is what was captured in Blackadder, and it's just ridiculous. Machine guns are just there like that. Germans are just there with the machine guns, and these British people are just in tons of British people just runs toward it and they get mowed down. What happens after that? Well, we have to go there. We can't just stand here. So they send another people, knowing they're gonna get mowed down. I mean, I don't understand the mentality behind. I mean, I understand the tactics behind it because they have to. They can't relieve the pressure there. But what are the people's mentality? First group got moved down, and now you're at the second group. And like, oh, you have to go there. You know you're going out there just to die. First of all, it's no man's land, so it's flat ground, not much of a cover there. There's a reason, because first of all, trenches are dug at the place strategically, so no man's land is flat, so people can see who's coming and who not. You run there and they just have machine guns. They're just like mowed down. Oh god, this is so bad.
Some units do break into the German line. Near Thiepval, the 36th Ulster Division captures the Schwaben redoubt. But without support on either flank, it's isolated, and the survivors are forced to retreat that night. On their right, the 32nd Division takes the Leipzig redoubt, while near La Boisselle, the 34th Division captures the Lochnagar mine crater. But these are just small toeholds in the German line, far short of their objectives. In World War I, one of the greatest challenges faced by commanders is getting accurate information about the course of the battle. Reliable field radios haven't been invented yet. Telephone lines are regularly cut by shell fire. So officers must turn to messengers, flag signals, light signals, even homing pigeons, none of which is completely reliable. To get around this problem, during an attack, supporting artillery works to a fixed timetable, moving their fire onto the next line of enemy defences at a set time. So when the infantry start their attack, gunners adjust their fire onto the second line of enemy defences. But if the infantry get held up, the supporting fire keeps moving on according to the timetable. The infantry get left behind and are at the mercy of enemy machine guns. Aerial observation by
Even that shit is predictable. How you gonna be hoping to survive that? Even that is seriously predictable. They could just know when to fire.
balloons and aircraft can provide valuable information, but rely on good weather and control of the skies. This is why, on the 1st of July, it takes British commanders hours, even days, to find out which attacks have been successful and which have failed.
That's a
This makes
massive
it
time.
extremely difficult for them to react to the situation
Yeah.
with any speed. Further south, there is much greater success. Despite heavy losses, the 21st and 7th Divisions take Mametz and cut off the heavily defended village of Fricourt, which the Germans abandon overnight. On their right, the 18th and 30th Divisions take their objectives, including the village of Montauban, which is secure by 11 a.m. Alongside them, the veteran French 20th...
There's a village between two trenches. Are there people inside? Because if I were one of them, I would have just evacuated. I would rather sleep in an open ground than stay in that village.
Corps also takes its first day objectives, as well as 2,500 German prisoners. The Germans didn't expect the offensive to extend so far south, and are less well prepared. And, crucially, the Allied bombardment is boosted by French heavy guns, which are much more effective at destroying barbed wire and German strongpoints. At 9:30 a.m., French colonial troops lead the attack south of the Somme River. The French seize all their objectives and take 3,000 more prisoners.
That is
Despite
impressive.
success in the south, the first day of the Battle of the Somme is a costly failure for the British. German losses for the day are estimated at 12,000 men. The French lose 7,000. But the British suffer a staggering 57,000 casualties.
God
One-third of
damn!
them killed. the 1st of July 1916 becomes the bloodiest day.
This is in one day? 50,000 British, damn! They just like, go there, go die, who cares, just go. We have to keep the pressure on, there is no other tactics, go there. God. At the times like this, somebody deserts. I can understand that.
In the history of the British Army. And it's just the first day in a battle that rages for another 4 months, finally ending in November amid freezing rain and mud. By then, the Allies have advanced 10 miles at a cost of 430,000 British casualties, 200,000 French casualties, and 450,000 German.
Too many people
It makes
died,
the
man.
Battle of the Somme one of the bloodiest in history. In British popular memory, the Somme is remembered as an unmitigated disaster and tragedy, evidence of the incompetence of British generals and the pointless sacrifice of the gallant soldiers under their command. But to those who fought
God,
it
look at
and
the
those
photo.
at home, the Battle of the Somme was seen as a success. Casualties were enormous and hard to bear, but across Europe every warring nation was suffering terrible losses, as all commanders struggled to find an answer to trench warfare.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
And at the Somme, the British had not only helped save their French ally, who went on to defeat the Germans at Verdun, but learned vital lessons about how to fight on the Western Front. Most of all, the Battle of the Somme had been a costly but necessary wearing down of the German army, an immensely painful but vital step on the long road to victory. Maps and research for this video come from Osprey Publishing's
That is so effed up. Understand that they had to do that. It's a trench warfare. There is no answer to trench warfare. What tactics are going to use? This is the best thing they could have done. And they had to send people there even though they knew most of them are going to die. Obviously the generals and people could have strategized it better so casualties are minimum. But in the end, lots of people are going to die regardless because that is how trench warfare is. They had to do that, otherwise Verdun gets weaker and that's a weak point where Germans can just push through, and that's not good. You can't have massive weak points in the borders like that. God, this is horrible. In the end, all I think is because one guy got shot, this many people died just like that because of one guy. That's what I'm saying. World War II, I can understand some moron just had his just mind filled with all the anger and hate to the world, rose up and did all those things. Hitler. There is no Hitler in World War I. Just one guy got shot and everybody just tried to kill each other. This is just horrible. Alright, if you like my reaction, please don't forget to hit like and subscribe.